Welcome to Neuroscience Unplugged, where we get real about the brain and what it takes to build resilience in the messiness of modern life. I am so thrilled because I am joined today by Amanda Baker, who is the wonderful mother, entrepreneur, story strategist, coach, and founder of the Five Stories methodology. She works with founders, creatives, and change makers to help them make sense of who they are and what they stand for by telling the stories that matter. Today, we're diving into the neuroscience of resilience, what it is, how it works in the brain, and how telling your story can actually strengthen your capacity to adapt, recover, and stay grounded. Amanda is not just here to talk theory, she has lived it. As a mom, entrepreneur, and a guide for others navigating big personal and professional shifts, she knows what it means to build resilience from the inside out. So let's get into it. Motherhood alone is resilience personified. And that's a path that you have to navigate yourself. Whereas you decided, I'm also going to rebrand the business and come up with a different concept that is more individual rather than perhaps business to business. And I know that you did explain that there was a challenging time around that, that you're also navigating as well. Do you mind sharing with the listeners just how you bounced back essentially during that time?
Oh, great question. And I want to start off by saying I don't think I did bounce back, really. I think I bounced into a different version of myself. And I think that is the narrative around resilience that I'm trying to, I guess, it's not just about taking ownership, it's about making the narrative around resilience feel right for me. Same with as authenticity and all of these words that I think we are called throughout our lives. I remember being called resilient way back in the day when I was scarily stabbed in a nightclub and nearly lost my life and I was in my first year of university and ended up having to drop out of my first year because I couldn't write. I was stabbed in my wrist. So I had to literally go 12 months of trying to learn how to use my hand again and all of that stuff. And I remember being called resilient and and I feel like this whole concept of bouncing back, I don't think it really is quite right. I think it's about um resilience is a response to change. It's a response to how you respond to something that happens that pushes you off of your path or pushes you into a different dimension of yourself. That's kind of how I see resilience after experiencing what it really means in my own way. And I think when it comes to this concept of resilience, I think it is ultimately I think it's the most powerful way to grow as a human being. And I think it comes down to when something happens, when we choose to respond to that thing that has happened to us, it's about, okay, what does this mean for who I am right now? What does this mean for my story? How, instead of me feeling like the victim, because I really felt like the victim in that experience because the people who did that to me, they were never found. There was a big case that happened and there was no one to sort of blame there was no justice there. So I had to go through just accepting, which was my own process, accepting that, okay, cool, this has happened. I'm having to learn new ways to live and be and all of that kind of stuff. And thankfully, I'm still here because if it was the other side of my wrist, I wouldn't have survived that. So, lots of gratitude, lots of me having to just reconnect with who I am after I've been through that, and then take that as the core messy ingredients for my next version of who I am. And that for me is what it really means to be resilient. I think it's about how we respond to hard things that happen to us throughout our lives. And the same goes for motherhood. I responded to motherhood with, well, gosh, a very different experience because the emotions that run through your body, oh my goodness, like they are wild. They are so wild. And I think there's this for me when I went into motherhood, I definitely wasn't ready for it. I definitely wasn't prepared on a mental level. And I was really holding on to the person that I was before I was a mother. On the date that my daughter was born, two people were born that day, me and my daughter. But the problem that I had was that I really struggled to let go of the Amanda that I was before I became a mum. I really, really struggled with that identity shift, that identity change. It took me a really long time to respond to that change, which of course is resilience, how you respond to change. It took me a long time to respond to that change. So it took me a long time to grow through it. It took me a long time to understand, what does this mean for me, for this version of who I am right now? And that's what led me to look at everything, every single part of my life with a different lens, a new perspective, the perspective of now I'm not just Amanda, founder of the Five Stories methodology, a consultancy for business, someone who has survived a stab wound, all of these things that have made me who I am over the years. I mean, that was just a very scratched surface thing of what's made me over the years. But, I am now Amanda, who is a mother. And what does it mean for how can I be a successful, quote unquote, a successful business person, a business owner, and also be successful at being a mother? This new role that I now have, I've never done before. I have absolutely no idea how to do it. So it was just this really weird, wonky, wobbly, like it was just so uncertain. It was so like it just wasn't clear for me. But that really meant that I had to accept and just stay in that moment of, which is really hard, right, for us human beings, when we constantly see ourselves and imagine who we want to be, and then we're kind of in this really messy patch of a transition, this kind of neutral zone, or this in between chapter zone. And it's just like, okay, well, how can we stay there? How can we stay there for longer and really just feel it all? Because I really do think that when we do that, when we really stay in those uncomfortable spots, that's when we really understand. That's when we get the answers that we have been searching for probably all of our lives. That's when we can really start to understand ourselves on this really intimate, closer level, and pull out those really important, meaningful answers to the questions that we have, like, who am I? Because that's the thing. We've gone from one person, one version of ourselves, to another version of ourselves because of something that has happened that has changed us. How we respond to it is how it sets our path for the next chapter of our becoming, I believe.
You have unpacked so much in that, Amanda. First of all, I'm so thankful that you are somebody who challenges what you think and what you know. You said yourself, staying in that area of discomfort is where we do reflect and think, what is working, what isn't. You essentially described that when you went through the stabbing incident, and you didn't unfortunately get any closure, but you said, what can I do to close this cycle? What can I do to move forward with this, knowing that I've come through this, and I'm not necessarily going to be able to confront the individuals that have done this, and they're not going to get the justice
Yeah.
for what they did, essentially. So you close that loop, which in itself is something that we think about when it comes to resilience. From what I understand, you're saying it's something you choose to keep going with when it comes to resilience. How do you move through things? And
Mm.
in this particular example, you've just demonstrated how to do that. You could have easily lived in that narrative for the rest of your life and essentially defined yourself through what happened. But instead, you said, I'm going to make new memories. I'm going to create new adventures. That is something that happened in the past. It's something I'm going to learn from, reflect, and as you said, sit in that discomfort and face up to it. But I'm going to make new memories, and your daughter came in, your new business, consultancy, all of those elements you have flourished from. And that's, for me, is just the beginning. I feel like it's not even, end chapter of Amanda's story. I feel it's just the start of what you're building. Your brand itself is about being genuine and authentic. And that's something that I have definitely known you for since I've met you. From that second week, I remember conversing in the bookshop, like you said, all night over our drinks. It was always truth coming out of your mouth. And that's why I was like, I love this woman. And it was so refreshing. You were talking about work, you were talking about motherhood, you were talking about life, every single thing that we engaged in conversation with, even other people on that night. You were so truthful,
Mm.
unapologetically truthful. And it was so refreshing to find that. When I read all your social media posts and, when I attended your workshop as well, again, it was all very genuine and authentic. And I know that's one of your taglines, but you do actually follow through on what you're recommending for other people to do. You really do lead by example. And that is what's wonderful, that the person I know offline is exactly the person I know online as well. And often they can be two different personas, right? We know that.
Mhm.
And that's quite hard to get. And you've achieved that, right? Through all of the events, shall we say, that you've put yourself through and built that resilience and said, okay, what am I going to learn from it? How am I going to move forward? What am I going to do next time around? Whatever the challenges come my way. I
Hmm.
want to tap into this a bit more actually, because you talked about discomfort. Excuse me. And this is something that comes up a lot with individuals that are feeling that pool of what am I going to do next? There's no expectations, but there's also that fear of almost jumping off that cliff about making that decision. Should I, shouldn't I do it? And that fear often is what keeps people in that zone of comfort to say, you know what, everything's okay. It may not be residing well in my body. It may not be working for me right now, but I know it works. So I'll just stay here. I want to feed into that discomfort a bit. Were there any signs in your body that you could perhaps pinpoint that were signifying overwhelm at any point?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was going through those transition phases, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I get overwhelmed just anyway because I'm a big creative ideas person and have feel very fortunate that I just get bombarded with lots of ideas all day, every day. So yes, the overwhelm definitely has been present in all of my experiences of change because I think it comes down to you're holding on to the pieces that make up that identity, and then you're also starting to gather the pieces of your next of your becoming of your next self. So then it's just like, oh, I'm holding. You got this container, it's just all going in, and you're just like, fuck, man, I don't know what to do with all this. Where do I put that? Which parts are me? Which parts aren't me? Like, do I like that part? Does this even fit me anymore? This story that I've been telling about myself for God knows how many. Oh gosh, just nearly not my laptop. That's like defined me. That part of my life, or do I take this into my next version of myself? Yeah, I think it's like that, and I think the overwhelm is a part of that discomfort, and the overwhelm it has, and actually it's a signal that hey, you're onto something here. Like how can you? And it's a gorgeous quote that I heard from Elizabeth Gilbert, and I'm paraphrasing here, but she talks about how can we learn how to sit and be comfortable in the experiences that have the power to transform us. And I think it's really that. I'll show you the full quote to bring into the show notes. But, and I think it is that, like, all of these hard, difficult, changing, comfortable, key, painful things that happen to us throughout our lives, whether it's, and I'm not saying motherhood is icky or anything like that, but it is uncomfortable and it is overwhelming and it is like fucking scary because you're now having to look after a human and keep them alive as well as yourself. And that's like, whoa, 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 whoa. But, you know, all of these things that come at us is really about I think the first thing is how can we be present in that experience, as present as we can be, because I think it's that fight or flight thing that triggers us, right? We're like trying to get ourselves out of it as quickly as possible. We're trying to rush out of the discomfort. We're trying to rush out of the overwhelm, of the unknown, of the uncertainty, and that is absolutely. And hey, I catch myself doing that too. But what I think is really, really where I think the I don't even know what to call it. Let's just say the gold, where that gold is really when we stay with it, when we lean in, when we get close up, when we really start to listen to the questions that are coming up, like who am I? What do I want? What do I need? What is working for me? What isn't working for me, because I don't think in this whole world that we're living in where culture is just so more faster further, it's just like it's like we're programmed to keep going, but keep going and go faster and always find these ways to just keep climbing and climbing. But hey, no, I think that's all wrong, because I think when we do that, I think we are immediately doing ourselves a disservice, because we're saying, hey, I don't want to be with myself in that person. I just want to get away from myself. But no, stay with yourself, because when you stay with yourself, you start to understand who you really are, and more importantly, how that learnings and lessons and part of your story is going to become the most incredible foundation for that next self, for you to become even more unapologetically you, even more authentic, like genuinely authentic. I think you can only really truly be your most authentic present self when you do that work of staying in the mess, staying in that hard bit, being present in that, and just challenge yourself to fucking listen to yourself. Like challenge yourself to listen to yourself, because that's the hardest thing to do in this life. It really, really is. And is what I have done and I have practiced. And you say, and thank you for saying all of those gorgeous things about how you see me and how you receive me. Because imagine if we could all receive each other like that. I think resilience isn't just a response, it's how you receive it as well. So it's about, because once you do that work to respond to the change, that's how we grow resilience, by really staying in that hard part, in that struggle, in that uncomfortable zone. When we do that, then we start to get to a point where like, oh wow, it's like it's like I feel like this is who I am now, and I'm so clear about that, and I feel so empowered because I've done that work and I know what that means for my story and who I am now, which means I can go and share it with people. And then what we're doing, as people are receiving those stories and they're feeling, they're growing their own resilience, because they're like, oh my gosh, that could be me too, or if they can do it, I can do it too. That's the power of the story, and how it helps us to nurture resilience for ourselves and each other, I believe.
Yes, absolutely. And you've even explained some practical strategies to work through that discomfort. And as you said, we are such a fast culture. We have
Mm,
so many distractions at our fingertips, literally. So it's so much easier to scroll. It's so much easier to watch Netflix and go
yeah.
and feed into what's going on in other people's lives rather than focus on what it is that I need to get to the bottom of it.
Mm,
And that is easier. Do you remember back in the day before we had any of that? We'd be out with our friends, we'd be out in nature,
yeah.
but sometimes we had to be bored to be able to face up to these things as well. Now, what's happened, what I'm observing is that people's lives, when they're sharing that they're starting over or they're making new changes, they were forced into them in some cases. Physical ailments might come up, endings may have happened, and they will have seen beforehand that they should have maybe closed the cycle a lot sooner. And they weren't listening. Very much like you said, you were very self aware. That's something I observed when you were just talking about what your triggers were. When you said, I need to sit with myself, I need to do the work and understand who I am today and what it is that I need. So for me, your metacognition is unmatchable. Self awareness and feeding into your bodily functions, your mental functions, knowing what it is that you need is part of that loop, right? And it's
Mm,
something that you've genuinely done the work for. And you've said connection, which is something that calms the vagus nerve down. Because as you said, when we are triggered by flight or fight, our brain is going into protection mode, right? It needs to keep you safe. Which is great. It's doing what it's supposed to do. But then by doing something, which is what you did, you challenged that and said to your amygdala, right, I'm not going to live in this place of fear. We're going to step it up and we're going to question what we need to let go of. Bye. You're literally hand in the face to your amygdala. And we're like, yeah, bye. Not right now. This is going to be on my terms. I'm going to tell my story the way I want to. And that means I need to reflect on who I am today, essentially. And that is
absolutely.
such a great tool to use, whether it's through journaling, whether it's through visual journaling, whether it's through talking to your friends, as you said, receiving and sharing what perhaps you've gone through means that somebody else who may be going through something similar could also learn from that and say, well, actually, I'd never thought about doing that. Or have I consciously taken the time to sit down and think about the questions that Amanda has set for me? And that's often our procrastination, let's call it for now.
Mhm.
Grab that pen and paper and think about what we need comes almost second to what other people need in some cases. If your boss was to ask you, right, for today's review, I'm going to ask you all to sit down and think about what your team needs.
Mm,
You'll sit down and do it in a heartbeat, right? But when you've got to do it for yourself from a self-development perspective, what I've observed, it doesn't come so easy to people. And what you've done there is you've made it quite practical and easy to do. Come down with these questions, respond from a genuine place, because this isn't about showing off. You don't need to prove these answers to anyone. This is for yourself, right? That self-recognition to say, what is it that I need? And you've already spoken, Amanda, about so many uncertain times that you've navigated, and that was just touching a few of them in the previous section. You're also helping other people through huge transitions, right?
mhm.
And whether it's through a business, that does translate into your personal life as well, because often people's business is their personal life, essentially. When you're a one person band, you're having to do so many roles, and that takes into account what's going on in your personal life. What do you think has been a trending theme with the people that you've been helping bring big transitions to? in terms of helping them calm themselves during these uncertain times?
Mm. Well, one thing that they all share is this overwhelm, the overwhelm feeling,
Mm,
because I think of what I touched on earlier, which is they have this version, that this is this is who they were, this is where they are, and this is who they're becoming. So it's kind of like this metamorphosis of them going into this new version of themselves, but having to stay in the cocoon. Actually, one of my incredible clients described where she was at like that. So I do ask people to, hey, I know you're in a transition, and most people are saying, I'm in a transition, I'm trying to figure things out, I've got this new idea, or I've got all of these ideas and I don't know which one to focus on. I have a really great story to tell, but I don't know where to start, I don't know where to begin, I don't know what parts of it are going to resonate the most with my audience, things like that. So there's that external piece. So there's like an internal piece, there's an external piece, but to get to the external piece, you have to go through the internal piece. Otherwise, you're not going to show up authentically. Otherwise, you are going to experience meaning burnout, because meaning burnout happens when we're not true to ourselves. Or, and meaning burnout happens everywhere, but no one's talking about meaning burnout. Everyone's talking about burnout. But that's more of a crisis, the meaning burnout part, because we're all just feeling empty and doing too much of the work that doesn't light us up, and we're ignoring ourselves in that process. And when we ignore ourselves, ignore our gut, our inner intuition, or our gut feelings, or all of that kind of stuff, when we really ignore that, then we start to lose ourselves. When people say they feel lost, when people say they feel disconnected, all of that is because we're to please the algorithm, to please our bosses, to please our parents, to please the systems that have been built to keep us small, to keep us disconnected to ourselves and each other, which is why so many humans are just walking around on their screens like that. Like you say, we're feeling, we're not giving ourselves the space and the time. Well, not even just like, we're not giving ourselves these spaces to reflect, to remember, to be bored. We're constantly filling up our time now, our spare and free time. Like exactly what you were saying, on our mobile phones, we have so much fucking information at our disposal. We have so much communication coming at us, and it's literally just too much. I don't know if you've ever felt this, but there's sometimes where I have this idea and I'm like, yeah, I'm reading this, I'm reading that, and I'm like, gosh, I can't even get the thing done anymore because I'm just so overwhelmed by all of the stuff that I've just consumed that I just need to go and lie down, like, or just go and smell some leaves or something, like in the bush outside. Do you know what I mean? It's like something you got to do something to just like, whoa, the overload is next level, and it's just pushing us further away from ourselves and each other, and that's where we're at the moment. But what I'm getting at here is, in order to understand ourselves and understand what our stories and what we've been through and what it means for us, for ourselves, for our businesses, how it all comes together and connects and has this coherent feeling, and people keep saying to me as well that I want it to be consistent, I want things, I want to understand how it all comes together for myself and my business, like how does it all come packaged up. And I'm like, great, yeah, we can get there, but first of all we need to, here's your container of everything that you've been through, everything that has made you, all of the stories, all the narratives that you've clung on to, you've held close to your heart, and the ones that you're starting to feel icky about. Let's just pour it all out, and let's just dive in. Let's just scurry around. Let's just scratch and scratch and scratch and scratch like a chicken, and just see what feels what feels right, what feels true, what feels like your most potent truth for this moment, this version of who you are right now. And then how does it? Then we can work that out. And then what happens when we work that out? We start to see all these gorgeous clues and these gorgeous cookie crumbs of, oh, that's why you are doing this work. That's why you feel called to do this. This one client, she works in a big tech finance corporate. She came to me because actually she was recommended from another client who did an EMBA, and was like, Amanda, this person definitely needs like what you're offering in your story coaching program. I'm like, cool. She came in, she was like, Amanda, I don't know what I want to do. I've done my EMBA. I'm in this job. I'm a VP, like top of my game, earning great money, but it's not working for me anymore. Like I need more. I need something more. I need more meaning. And it's that meaning bit. I need more meaning. I'm like, okay, great. But I have all of these ideas and I just don't really know which one I want to do. By the end of the program, because we go on a journey. Your stories are a journey back to who you are. That's the ultimate truth. So we go from origin, unpacking like the journey she's been on up to this point, the most vital parts, the things that stood out the most to her, the things that changed her, where she felt called to, who inspired her, or the moments where it was just like, oh, this changed me, or this made me change the direction in my change course, or change direction in my career, or something like that. So we're really unpacking all of these origin moments. But what we found out was there was a really deep connection between her and her grandmother, and then a really deep connection between her and her parents and the business that they set up, and how that business was also her grandmother's business, her grandmother Hilda, and all of this nutritional good stuff. And it was like, okay, cool. So your parents are entrepreneurs, but your parents were entrepreneurs because they had a business that was passed down to them from your grandma. Okay, amazing. And her grandma was the first engineer in this one of the first female engineers in Germany, and then she went on to start her business back in the 60s, 50s, 60s. So this all this gorgeous story. But what happened was, when her parents had the business, they had to shut it down. They tried to scale it. They tried to really live the legacy of, I think it was the father's mother, but it just wasn't working anymore. So they shut down. And we got to the purpose story, and she was just like, I really care about all of these businesses that end up closing down, or they don't, or they exit in a way. They have an exit strategy that doesn't serve the founder, the creators and the founders get burnt out. They then get, okay, the exit's done, but no, there's no aftercare. There's no programs. There's nothing to help them navigate this change, this becoming, or this letting go and becoming. And she wants to set up a company to serve that, and it's called Hilda's Legacy. And this whole idea came out of this program, and it connects back to the story of her grandmother. And now the whole brand and the whole story around that, where she now is creating this company that's going to support founders, and business owners to create or have the exits that they deserve, that actually looks after their well-being, but also make sure that their legacy, their business, is being looked after for their next chapter, instead of being just dismantled for money, or run into the ground, or whatever it goes on. That it's honoring the legacy of the people that started and created the business. And that all came from understanding her origin story, and listening to the backstory, and how she grew up and where she grew up and all of that.
You're holding space for Hilda's legacy. We know the brain doesn't like uncertainty. It needs stability, it needs structure. And you said yourself, when her parents were having to close that business, they were in that state, essentially. And I imagine her grandmother as well. I mean, to be the first female engineer, in Germany, and to be starting a business as well in those days, is huge, right? So many steps of uncertainty were already unpacked. And then she came to you in this moment and said, right, I've got these brilliant things that I'm bringing to the table. I just don't feel connected right now to what I'm doing. And so you were able to sit together in this coaching program and said, right, let's start from the beginning. As you said, let's look at where this all stems from. Where does your purpose and drive come from? And it sounded like her journey at the moment isn't aligned with what she wants to do and create and put out in the world. It just feels very much like a tick box exercise. She'd done the MBA. She'd created a really successful career as a VP, you said, and she'd seen these inspirational role models around her parents, her grandparents, her grandmother, sorry, that had created these beautiful pieces of what they're, putting out in the world. And she was like, I want to do something, but I don't know what it is. So you helped her do that. And you talked about storytelling, and you talk about storytelling that is, essentially your product. This is how you get people to align with what they're creating. Something I've observed in the entrepreneurial space is that they're not always quick to share their stories. They may share their entrepreneurial story, how they got to where they did from a business perspective, but they don't necessarily share from a personal perspective. Do you think that perhaps comes from a place of judgment, or is it that they're vulnerable? I'd love to get your insight on that.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think it's a couple of things. I think there's a fear, which is of course made up of the fear of being judged, the fear of not being believed, the fear of people thinking less of you because you've experienced something that maybe puts you in a position of weakness, or things like that, especially when it comes to business, because I think business has even the word feels hard, and like hard skin, tough skin, things like that. So I think all the narratives and the language around it is basically saying, no, you have to put your armor on, quoting Brene Brown, you have to put your armor on, you have to shield yourself, you have to, if things are tough and things are hard and things are struggling, you've got minus in your business bank account and you've got notifications coming up on your thing every 5 minutes to say you can't pay something or you can't put food on the table or all of these really tough moments of the startup journey when it is really icky and wonky and uncomfortable and it's not perfect and it just sucks. We're told to hide all of that and just pretend that everything's okay and pretend that everything is perfect and shiny and that we are winning and we are and we talk about the good stuff. We talk about the good stuff because we want people to we care about what people think of us. We really like as a species really care about what people think of us. We really care about what people say about us. And that is the ultimate truth. And I'm not saying that we have to care less, but I'm saying is we need to figure out our own our own recipe for what it means to shop with our story. And we all have a different recipe because we are all uniquely different. And that is the gorgeous, incredible magic of being a human being. And our stories, without stories, we don't exist. Without stories, we cannot connect. We could not create relationships with one another. So it makes me really sad when entrepreneurs don't, not just entrepreneurs, just humans in general, especially what we touched on earlier with the screen sucking away our energy and our time and our attention. And we travel next to human beings, we're walking and brushing past human beings all the time, but the one simple way to connect with another human being is to say hello. We're not even doing that, the basic word that just says hello. Do you know what I mean? Things like that. So it just makes me really sad that you know we don't that we don't show up more with our stories, because I honestly truly and deeply believe that when we do, and I'm saying when because it's happening and I am so determined to, and I feel it, like create this wave of change through teaching, storytelling, and I really truly do deeply believe that Five Stories is going to be at the center of this change, because it's not just me as well. It's there's other coaches. There's so many people out there who are doing this work, this gorgeous, incredible work of teaching storytelling, teaching practical ways of showing up and being truer to ourselves and kinder to ourselves through the words and through
Something you touched upon when you said, sharing your story can feel scary. Right, that social threat, when that kicks in, again, that good old amygdala comes back in. When we feel that, and we've programmed ourselves from young to feel that, we have to retrain our minds to overcome that. And very much like you said, storytelling is that. And this is something that hasn't always been around in business. I've seen enough to see way businesses operate change. And I do love the fact that storytelling is coming into it. I do love reading the genuine stories behind people and what they're perhaps overcoming day to day, or perhaps what they're going through, because you can connect with that yourself. And it's that level of, if they're sharing, then I know it's okay for me to share. And suddenly that threat starts to become less and less, because you say, okay, well, it's happened, it's accepted. The world is still going on. My business, their business is still surviving. And if anything, it builds trust and credibility, because if you're somebody who is talking about everything, the highs, the lows, you know that you're going to keep it real when you're with your clients as well. And
the
especially now, individuals don't always have the resources to necessarily spend on coaches and mentors and workshops. So for somebody to come to you, they want to make sure that they are getting their money's worth, not just the product and what you're going to be holding space for, your experience, because you're teaching people how to tell their story. If you yourself are not doing that, how are
yeah.
you leading by example? And it's something that you have always done. Your personal branding on that is completely spot on. Like, you're so
Okay,
genuine and thorough with that.
thanks,
And
mate.
I know that you talked about sense of identity as well. You said this quite earlier on when you were talking about when your daughter was born. There were two people born that day.
Yeah.
Essentially, now you're having to look after this one human being and make sure that they stay alive. But what I feel, it's helped shape your narrative through the memory as well. And you have constantly adapted that to what your needs are as well. And you've spoken about this, that when you lose track of who you are, you talked about Hilda's legacy, you talked about examples in your life as well. What it sounds like, the storytelling just helps you build that internal map again and come back to who you are, come back to heart, come back to source, because that's who we are, right? And that is constantly evolving day by day, minute by minute. Everything you read, yes, we have access to multiple avenues of reading, to communicating, to learning. That is shaping your internal map, because suddenly you've learned something that you could add to that and take a little detour essentially. But
Love the
you
detours.
juggle so much. Oh, they're the best. The detours, the unexpected detours
Oh,
are the best.
they are.
They're the best.
uh, Examples in this conversation over here. Yeah.
Right? Exactly. They are. And you juggle so much, as a mum, as an entrepreneur, as a daughter, etc. The responsibilities go on. Okay. If we were to list all the titles you do day to day from a mental load perspective, because you talked about cognitive overload earlier as well, when we're just relayed with so much information. So, as well as having to do that, and you talked about overwhelm, as well as having to create new ideas to solidify them and actually create a brand and a project itself. You've talked about some practical things that you do, that you take a step back. You might go for a jog, you might do something that's very grounding and reminding you of your life outside of the overwhelm, which is always such a great sphere to hone in on. Is there anything else that you can share with the listeners that could help them come back to their self? You're very methodical with your process of helping your clients get to the source of what they're looking for and finding that purpose and meaning. So I'm thinking, do you have one question that the listeners could reflect on instantly when they're listening to this podcast that could get them thinking about the rest of their story?
One
Because
question.
when we're hit with
Gosh.
that overwhelm, which,
Yeah.
as you said, it's rife in all our lives. So when that overwhelm kicks in, a question that grounds us and brings us back to say the why, essentially.
I don't necessarily think it is a question. I think the questions are more about the curiosity. We ask questions to figure things out. If this is a practice or something to help people who are experiencing the overwhelm to just come back to center or come back to themselves, I think it comes down to one simple thing: breathe. I honestly think it is just about breathing. There's an incredible guy, Connor, his name is, I can't remember his surname, but he is the CEO of a company called, I believe there's a book around it called Make Time. We had a chat a couple of weeks ago, and he talked to me about breathing and these really incredible breathing exercises to help us come back to ourselves when we're experiencing overwhelm, or we just have that. When I think about overwhelm, I think, what does it feel like? It feels like that tight knot in your stomach. Sometimes you feel it here, and it's just like, it's like something really pressing on your chest. Your stomach feels quite knotted, and your brain feels like really foggy and just like a static TV when it's like zzz. I feel like your brain feels like that. That's just my personal description of it, but I'm sure many people have that same or something to build on there. But I think it's literally just shutting screens and everything, like getting everything that could distract us out of the way. Or if we have our little ones around us saying, "Hey, baby, I love you so much. I'm just going to go for a walk," and no headphones, no nothing, no phone. Leave the fucking phone at home. Put it in a drawer or something. Turn it off, and just go for a walk and just like. I think it's just like breathe in for 4, breathe out for 4, or something like that. I can't remember what the things is, but it's just like do a really deep breath in, do a really deep breath out, and just keep doing that and noticing your breath. I sound like a yoga teacher, but I'm really not. I don't do the meditation or anything like that. I'm someone who finds a lot of clarity and a lot of, I give myself love and my body love and my heart love and my soul love when I swim. I swim because I can't take my phone. I swim because I just love the boringness of going up and down and up and down, and I switch it up and spice it up by doing breaststroke. And then I come back and I do front crawl and I do breaststroke and I go underwater and I imagine myself as a mermaid, because I used to do that when I was a kid. I really wanted a little fake tail to go in. I honestly believed I was a mermaid at one point. I don't know if you ever saw the film Splash. It was like a 70, I think it's like a 70 film. My gosh, with Tom Hanks. Fucking hell, that was the best film. I love that film so much. And Beaches as well. Two of my favourite films back then. Anyway, still now.
Yes, epic.
Yes, absolutely. Anyway, we could talk about a whole other thing. Rabbit hole. Hi, a meaningful rabbit hole, obviously. But yeah, I think Get the screen away, get the distractions away, just fucking breathe, just breathe. And then, yeah, have that clearness. It's like just clearing, just clear it, just clear. The only way we can clear the overwhelm and the noise and that stress is just by breathing.
What you've just strategized are stable things you can do when you're feeling unstable. As you said, you know that swimming works for you. You switched it up. You did a bit of
Mhm.
breaststroke, did a bit of a mermaid style, did a bit of front crawl. You knew
The
that.
butterfly, the mermaid, whatever you want to
Yeah,
call it.
do it all at once. Rid yourself of distractions. As you said, don't take your phone. You obviously know that those things work for you. And it sounds like you
Absolutely.
found something that when things are feeling overwhelmed and uncertain, going back to something that you know is going to work for you. So going back to a place of certainty, essentially. And the breath work is the box breathing, as you said, you breathe in for 4, breathe out for 4. It's so great to reset our nervous system when we're feeling like that. The Navy SEALs use it. I mean, if it's good enough for the Navy SEALs, it's good enough for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the breath work is brilliant, and it's absolutely been wonderful to hear your practical strategies that you can share with everyone. Is there
Mhm.
anything that you would like to share with the listeners about any upcoming project?
Oh, upcoming projects. Well, I'm launching a beta program, group coaching program, where I am because I do one-on-one coaching at the moment for 5 stories, where I work with people who are at a crossroads or who are in this transition phase, trying to figure out who they are for this next chapter of their work. Building businesses, entrepreneurs, creators who are feeling a bit burnt out. I work with all of these incredible people. But now I want to, what I'm hearing and feeling myself is that there's a really great opportunity to bring a small, intimate group of people together to experience this transformation together. I never use that word transformation, but I can't think of any other word to describe it right now. But this becoming together, and they go through the 5 stories, and also have one-on-one with me as well. So it's a little bit of both. But I just want to experiment. I want to experiment, and yeah, just gonna follow that curious mindset that I have after reading Anne-Law's book, Tiny Experiments, and I definitely yeah feel called to do this group coaching program. So that's coming up. I don't have a date on it yet, but throughout May I'm going to be talking about it more and also putting some feelers out and putting out a one pager where it will explain and talk about and walk people through the process, the journey, the experience, and of course the fee will be a lot more affordable because it is beta, and I am really looking to find some people who are ready for this work, who are ready to do the meaningful work of reconnecting with themselves through their story to see how it all comes together for the next chapter of their work. So really excited about that. And I have another Be Authentic, spelled AWE, as you know, and Be Authentic happening at the end of May as well, and also a TEDx workshop that I'm also doing on the 19th of May in person, live in London, Shoreditch. I would love to have people there if they are free and they'd like to join us. It's 6 till p.m. on the 19th. Wonderful.
I will also put your details where people can find you, your work on LinkedIn and all the social medias as well in the text. And I want to say thank you so much, Amanda, for coming on to Neuroscience Unplugged. And hopefully for the listeners, if it gave them something to think about, we want you to share it. We want you to reach out so we can know that sharing our story is powerful and can help transform our perspectives and resilience.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much,
much.
Amanda.